Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit today about principle we'll call number 5, dealing with creation, I guess. The forefathers' attitude was that we were created by a supreme being, and that because we were created by a supreme being, that all mankind was not only um, responsible to him, but we were equally in the eyes of God. And that's where our unalienable rights came from. And they believed that. And because of the writings of the individuals that they read, like John Locke, we've mentioned before, and William Blackstone is one that was well read, who had, he's very big about law. Blackstone was written many things about the laws and how God's creation affects those laws, and the laws of reason and the laws of nature, how they operate, and how we are subject to those laws because they were put in place by God, and how all of our laws are based upon those laws. Therefore, God's law is superior to all of our laws. And these things are very important that we understand, because today we have a society that is very staunch on pushing us to this natural selection, or this chance that we've all come into existence by some cosmos accident. And if that's the case, then we have a society that is lawless. See? And we're seeing that developing in our society with that attitude and that mentality, that we don't have any law. We're not accountable to God. We're not accountable to anybody but ourselves. And so we move into this lawlessness, which is the reason why we see all these growing trends in our society today about no respect for authority, no respect for law enforcement. We have these organizations that are coming against our organized law enforcement agencies, like the Border Patrol, and on we can go, because the basic importance of the principle, because remember, we're talking about principles on this blog here, and the principles, the understanding that our forefathers had when they created our Constitution, why they put these things that they put in our Constitution in there. Nowadays, we seem to want to deviate from those principles, because mainly we've allowed the infiltration into our school systems to where people don't understand these basic principles anymore. And if we think about these things, if we'll read about some of the things that John Locke and William Blackstone wrote, and the reasoning behind the conclusions that they've come to, it makes perfect sense, because we are created in the image of God according to the Bible. Now, there's a lot of attacks out there in the Christian world against these people and different things, and I just absolutely do not understand that. They try to deal with theology and doctrinal issues when we're dealing with these things, but we're not dealing with religion here. We're dealing with government. We're dealing with order of society. We're dealing with the principles that govern a good society that runs in the things our Constitution stands for: the ability to seek peace, the ability to live free and independent, the ability to have liberty, the ability to live a life independent of control and manipulation, because the Bible tells us that all government is good. And the thing that corrupts government is man. And so we have to understand where the corruption within man comes from, see, and that all comes from the Word of God. And I can switch gears and get into a theological lesson here really fast, but I'm trying really hard to stay away from that, because the purpose of our blogs here is to get us thinking about the basic principles that have established this nation as a free, moral people, and why our forefathers put the things that they put into our Constitution that they did. Because without them, our Constitution fails. Our society will fail. And we're seeing that erosion, and we're seeing that decay. There are people in our governmental institutions right now holding public office that absolutely hate the freedoms of our Constitution that have been given to the people. And we have to be able to recognize the basic fundamental principles, because if there's no law, if there's no order, if we don't have an accountable being that we are all subject to, then what's left? Then we have this big bang, or whatever we want to call, where Darwin's natural selection has come into place, and we're just by chance what we are, and and nothing really matters, sirrah, sirrah. And if that's the basic precept or principle governing your thought process, then it changes the way and your perception about everything when you're dealing with each other, when you're dealing with society as a whole. And as Locke talked about in the just right reason, if we just think about the things that we are declaring, and think about how we came to be, it just makes common sense that we've been created by a divine being that is superior to us. And he goes into all kinds of things. I'm not going to get into that because we don't really have the time to go through those issues detailed in these little blogs. These 10-minute little segments are just way too short to get into the real depth of the principles that we're talking about. But this principle we'll call principle number 5. The forefathers were 100%, not just the forefathers, the majority of society in that time were almost 100% behind the agreement that we have got all of our rights, we have got all of our laws based on divine order and purpose that God has orchestrated and set into motion. And there was a supreme being, they called him. George Washington mentioned several times the divine providence that guided this nation. Talks about the unseen hand of the Creator moving in the affairs of men that brought this country into existence. And they understood that, and they gave credit to God. You know, we can get into all kinds of debate on who God is, but see, the forefathers of this nation were not trying to promote a religion. They were trying to promote freedom of religion. Not freedom from religion, like we got some of them running around, but freedom of religion. In other words, if you believed a different theological point about who God was, they weren't going to argue that with you. They were going to say, you have the right to pursue that happiness and seek that God to the very end. Now, you want to debate Christianity, you want to debate some of these other religions out there, that's a different subject matter entirely. But in this nation, we have the right and the freedom to seek that God whom we have determined through right reason is God. And I'm running out of time again, so I'm going to have to get off of here. So we will see you on the blog.